will be fully immersed next week in Dallas, Texas in talking season. And there'll be a couple of new faces there in the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma. And it was almost 3 years ago to the day that we learned that Texas and Oklahoma had somehow stealthily figured out a way to get out of the Big 12 and join the SEC. They officially joined last Monday. And joining us now to talk about the first full week for the Oklahoma Sooners inside the Southeastern Conference is the managing editor of Sooners Wire. Sooners Wire on Twitter as well, and also at Locked On Sooners. His name is John Williams, self-proclaimed and probably true, the nicest guy on Twitter, as we say hello to John. John, welcome to South Carolina, Columbia, and the state, and also welcome you and your team to the SEC.
Hey, well, thank you very much. And it's not self-proclaimed. I've been called the nicest guy on Twitter since my days covering the Dallas Cowboys years ago. But no, excited to be in the SEC. It's a monumental season in college football, and I mean, conference realignment is always, and it's been something that's been at the forefront of college football for much of the last 25, 30 years. But what's happening this year is absolutely incredible with what Oklahoma and Texas are joining in the SEC, but also adding to the SEC.
John, that is a great moniker to have and a great honor to be proclaimed by Cowboys fans, I assume, the nicest guy on Twitter. How did all of that come about? And do you miss covering the Cowboys?
Well, I do not miss covering the Cowboys. It's frustrating also being a fan of the Cowboys. But no, just the way interacting with people via social media, you know how there are a number of just people out there that want to debate and argue and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'll try to spit facts and not get too heated one way or the other on things. So, but you know, love covering the Sooners. It's been such a fun ride these last 4 or 5 years that I've been able to talk Oklahoma football and beyond. But man, these last 3 years since the announcement of the move to the SEC has just created this anticipation and excitement for what's to come, especially this first year where marquee matchup after marquee matchup and reunions with, you know, Josh Heupel and Shane Beamer. And man, it's just a fun season that we're about to watch unfold.
Well, you spitting forth facts, you're going to fit in well here on SportsTalk. We love having you on the program. John Williams joins us here tonight talking about Oklahoma's first full week in the SEC. And John, let's go back to the beginning. Tail end of July, and if memory serves, news was breaking. I can't remember if it was official or just rumors during SEC media days back in 2021. But when the announcement came out that Oklahoma and Texas were joining the SEC, it clearly surprised a bunch of us around here in South Carolina. Was it a shock and surprise to you guys?
It absolutely was. It was my first full month over at Sooners Wire. And I don't think anybody had heard any rumblings of this being the case. And it had been some time since Oklahoma was connected to conference realignment. You know, you have to go back almost a decade to, you know, Pac-12 and the rumors that were at play there. But no, I don't think anybody saw this coming. The powers that be did a really good job at keeping this hush-hush in a world where nothing seems to stay hush-hush and everything gets leaked by somebody somewhere. The fact that it was months in the making, you know, dating back to the early spring to hear Greg Sankey and Joe Castiglione and Chris Del Conte talk about it, it was a bit of a surprise, I think, for everybody that does cover the Oklahoma Sooners, but also at the same time, understanding the world that we live in college football and college athletics, it came as understandable because Joe Castiglione, he's been with the Sooners for 25 plus years, and he's always been a forward-thinking athletic director. And so it's not too terribly surprising to see them see the landscape of college football, see where it's headed, and decide, hey, you know what, the SEC gives us the best opportunity for not just, you know, immediate financial security, but long-term financial security as, you know, the media rights deals become a bigger player in college athletics.
Sticking with the big picture first, and then we'll focus in on the football team, but clearly, there are sports at Oklahoma that will fit right in Southeastern Conference play, and I don't think miss a beat. And I'll start with softball. This is a move for everybody. Anytime these type mega conference moves occur, it's for football. But how much do you think some of the other sports made Oklahoma attractive, especially a team that has become the softball dynasty like what Patty Gasso has been able to build at OU?
She's excited about it. Everybody's excited about it. I mean, Big 12 play has provided good competition, obviously, because of Texas and Oklahoma State. This year, adding UCF provided some of that, BYU. but it's hard to find a conference as deep as the SEC is in softball. I mean, you could put it up against anybody in the country, Pac-12, that's no longer, the Big 12, but the SEC, I mean, they had all 13 teams in the NCAA tournament last year. Say what you will about how much quality there might have been with some of those teams. The fact that all 13 made it in says something to the depth of the conference. And so I think everybody's really, really excited for what that's going to mean for softball next season. Patty Gasso is under no illusion that it's going to be some kind of cakewalk. She acknowledged on SEC Celebration Day that it was going to be a grind, but she has always welcomed it. She's always been trying to schedule big-time teams, big-time programs in their non-conference to add to the level of competition that they have. And so, man, it's going to be super fun. LSU has been really, really good. Tennessee, Florida, obviously, they were just a few, outs away from knocking off Oklahoma and, going to the, College World Series finals themselves. So that's a really, really good program. So the SEC, I mean, it's stacked in college softball, and it's going to be a lot of fun for the Sooners.
John Williams joining us here on Sports Talk. He is from Sooners Wire. And, John, you had a good way of putting it. You said, just a lot of great matchups coming, a lot of great reunions for Oklahoma. But let me put it differently. An Oklahoma fan might look at Texas's schedule coming into the SEC and realize, okay, the first road conference game, the first opposing SEC stadium they'll visit is First Bank Stadium at Vanderbilt. Oklahoma, meanwhile, is going to Auburn, Alabama. They'll play Oklahoma will play Tennessee, will play Ole Miss, will play South Carolina, and close the season with Alabama and LSU. Meanwhile, Texas drew Mississippi State. Yes, they have Georgia, but they have a Florida team that might be rebuilding, Arkansas, Kentucky, before the renewal of the rivalry against Texas A&M. There would be some Oklahoma fans, I would guess, that would say this is an uneven scheduling as you start off in the SEC. What was your reaction?
Yeah, there's certainly a disparity between the strength of schedule for Oklahoma and Texas. But Oklahoma fans, I mean, this is what we were anticipating when we were joining the SEC. I don't think anybody was sitting there laying back expecting that it was going to be some kind of easy ride. Now, Oklahoma fans are used to Texas kind of getting a favorable schedule in conference play. It kind of always seemed to turn out that way with Texas, even in the Big 12. But, yeah, the way that this kind of worked out, it just happened to be one of those kind of cycles of program development that, hey, Tennessee's really, really good right now. Obviously, Texas is really good. Ole Miss is really good. Missouri is really good. Alabama, LSU, both really, really good. And then you throw in a road trip to Auburn that is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't matter what their record is going to be when September 28 comes around. That's going to be a really, really tough place to play and a really tough team to play. So the schedule is stacked. It's marquee matchups. It's really, really difficult teams. I mean, that Shane Beamer South Carolina team, I think we can sleep on it pretty easily because of the strength and the quality of opponent that are on the rest of Oklahoma's schedule. But, I mean, Lenore Sellers, Shane Beamer, he's a really, really good coach. There's a lot of athleticism, a lot of talent on that roster as well. They recruit pretty well, too. So it's going to be a tough matchup when they roll into Norman. But, I mean, the schedule is what the schedule is. Oklahoma is going to have to go and face it. And, hey, if they can get through the first couple months of the schedule and have just one loss and get to November, they'll be in a really good spot, and they'll have been battle-tested, and they'll be in a good place to maybe make the college football playoff if they can handle their November well.
John, Oklahoma just extended Brent Venables, so obviously the men and women in business suits are sold on Brent Venables. Is Sooner Nation sold on Brent Venables?
I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but most people that I speak to or most people I interact with would say yes. And it's the cultural development of the program that's at place. It's rebuilding a defense that was non-existent during Lincoln Riley's tenure. Even the best defense that they had in 2021, arguably the best defense they had in 2021, it was still inconsistent, and it still gave up too many points and too many big plays at times. And what Brent Venables has done in just a few years on the recruiting trail, I mean, he's had 3 top 10 classes according to 247 Sports, on the verge of probably having another top 10 class here in the 2025 cycle. He's doing it holistically, where he's not just building through the defensive side of the ball, which is his specialty, his expertise. He's getting blue chip and 5-star prospects on both sides of the ball. And there's reason to be optimistic about what the future holds, as Oklahoma has one of the highest blue chip ratios in the nation. Over the last 3 cycles, only 4 teams have recruited on average better than Oklahoma, and that's the teams that you'd expect: Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas. Well, Oklahoma is just right there behind those 4 teams. So everything is looking up. Things are optimistic. They went from 6-7 last year to 10-3 or 6-7 in year 1 to 10-3 last year. Went and beat a Texas team that nobody expected them to beat, and again, looks like a team that's progressing and on the rise. And a lot of it is the on-field stuff, but also the stuff that's happening off the field as well.
John, I think we can probably figure out the harsh feelings when Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, with that rivalry going, at least for now, by the boards. How much do you think that may have motivated Oklahoma State in the football game last year, maybe a last crack at Oklahoma before they head out the door?
Well, I think it's been a factor for the last several years. I mean, each time that Oklahoma has gone into Stillwater the last 2 times, Oklahoma State was able to pick up a win. So Oklahoma State fans, it's college football, right? In college football, you hold grudges. You embrace the pettiness. You embrace the vitriol. That's what kind of makes college football so great. And so going into Stillwater is never really an easy task, but the leaving for the SEC and the way Oklahoma State fans and administrators, Mike Gundy, other coaches inside the program feel about Oklahoma, I'm sure added a little bit of fuel to the fire and gave everybody a little bit of extra energy to go cheer on the Cowboys. But I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that one day we'll get Bedlam renewed. It's a matchup that means something. It may not be OU Texas, but it's one of those that moves the needle in this region that everybody gets excited for, everybody gets up for. Even if you're a casual college football fan, you have a side that you pick when it comes to Bedlam. So hopefully one day the cooler heads will prevail and they'll get football back on the schedule. You know how it is, like non-conference schedules are scheduled out so far in advance that it can be hard to manage some of those things. But you see other, Washington State figuring it out, and Oregon State figuring it out. So I'm hopeful that at some point they'll figure it out on the football field. Basketball is going to play, softball is going to play. So I imagine that down the road, Bedlam will return to the schedule. Now, will it be just a home and home, or will they make it an annual game, much like Clemson, South Carolina? Hopefully that's the case. I would love to see Bedlam on the schedule annually moving forward.
I agree with you. It's got such a cool name as well. You've got to have Bedlam played. And we've talked about it here on this show about South Carolina and Clemson being in different conferences. And with expansion, would there be a scenario where the state legislature needs to step in and mandate that USC and Clemson play every year? They haven't to this point. It hasn't been a problem, but you never know. Is that something that's talked about out in Oklahoma? Do the folks there need to step in possibly on down the road and figure out a way to pass some legislation to make sure that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State play?
I think at this point, I've not heard of any of the politicians trying to make moves on that front. But I think for a lot of Oklahoma fans, and I'm kind of in the minority, I think a lot of Oklahoma fans are okay with it going by the wayside. A lot of Oklahoma State fans, I think, are okay with it going by the wayside. But in a sport that's losing a lot of tradition seemingly by the year, protecting some of these games matters. And hopefully out there in South Carolina, the powers that be in the schools understand the importance of keeping that game on the schedule annually. And at some point, the powers that be here in the state of Oklahoma will figure out, hey, we need to get this back on the schedule. It's good for our state. It's good for our local economies. It makes a lot of sense. So let's make this happen.
John, we'll let you get out of here on this. I'm sure you're looking forward to SEC Football Media Days starting next Monday out in Dallas, Texas. Jackson Arnold's going to be representing OU, the sophomore quarterback. What can you tell us about him? What will Gamecock fans see out of him when they try and defend him? And it's unusual to see a sophomore going. I guess that sort of tells us everything we need to know about what Brent Venables thinks of him, right?
Yeah, he's a cool, calm, and collected quarterback. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Limited experience last year, but, got to have 4 games of, I would say, extended action where he got to throw some passes and do some things. And, I mean, he has all the tools. He's a former Gatorade National Player of the Year, former Elite 11 MVP, 5-star quarterback. So much of it's going to come down to how he reacts to some of the environments that he plays in and some of the defenses that he faces. This is a whole new adventure for everybody inside the program. For Jackson Arnold, it's going to be his first year starting, but he has all the tools to be really, really successful. He has the right mental makeup, right intangibles, the right character to go and be successful. So, it's going to be fascinating to see how his first swim through SEC play goes.
He's not just the nicest guy on Twitter. He's also the nicest and smartest guy on Sports Talk. John Williams, managing editor at Sooners Wire and also podcast host at Locked On Sooners, dialing us up here tonight to give us an insight into the first full week of SEC action, at least as a membership for Oklahoma. John, we appreciate the time so much. Thanks for carving out a few minutes for us here tonight. Look forward to we'll have Phil Kornblut, our leader, out in Dallas next week. Hopefully you guys can run into one another, and we'll see you on down the road.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having me on. It's always good to talk to the real USC.
I like it. I'm sure Gamecock fans will appreciate that as well. John, thank you so much. Enjoy the week.
Hey, have a good one.
Like a pro wrestler playing to the home crowd.
He was able to drop the atomic bomb on the way out the door. Not just the nicest, smartest guy on Twitter. I like that stuff. Good stuff from John Williams. We'll rehash some of what he had to say.